We know a lot of you want to own your own business, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to start one from scratch. Have you ever thought about buying a pre-existing business? There's many advantages, like quicker cash flow, a pre-existing customer base, and easier access to financing, even if you have no money. Today we're going to talk with Jackie Hirsch, owner of Crowne Atlantic. In her career, she's sold over 400 businesses. Let's find out from an expert what it takes to buy your own business.
He went to my high school. He dropped out when he was 15, and he wanted to work, and he worked construction, and he made a ton of money, had his own house by the time he was 18. But when I met him, again, he was 25 with a Lamborghini in the garage, paid for, doing $15 million a year. Yeah, no joke. And no investors, started with nothing.
Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So I sell companies. I've been selling companies since 1998. And the goal isn't to just sell it and you're off and running. The goal is community building.
Sure.
Finding that right buyer, the right fit to take the company to the next level. There are families that work there. There are people that depend on it. There are communities that need that business. And that's what we try and support here. And it's exciting for me to see, as I said, previously, watch people make something from absolutely nothing.
Definitely.
Make this huge enterprise. It's
nice. Fun. So you mentioned our viewers. Most of them are in construction or a trade. Some are entrepreneurs just looking to start a business. Can you tell us why it's better to buy an existing business than it is to start a business from scratch?
Buying a business is really a big stepping stone forward.
Okay.
You get branding, you get staff in place, you already have clients in place, you have a location most likely. There's all these things that are already happening for you. When you start, you got to start from scratch. There's no cash flow coming in. You have to figure out what you're going to call it, how it's going to operate. You have to start a marketing foundation. That huge stepping stone, that next foundation gives you something to build from. I almost equate it to if you have a book that needs to be edited, you can then take it to the next level. Because a great book has a great editor.
Sure.
And a lot of times, this is what you have the opportunity to do when you buy a trades business. And if you're great at that business, then you can use that and take your skill set to the next level, hire people for all those other functions you don't like. Or if you just like that business, you can have the tradespeople do that business and you can manage the business and grow it.
So you mentioned some things like building a brand or marketing and things like that. Is there one of those that you feel like is the biggest impediment to starting from scratch over other disadvantages from starting from scratch?
There's many impediments when you start from scratch.
Sure.
You have to have that runway of cash flow. So you have to be able to calculate how long it's going to take you to be able to support yourself.
Sure.
When you have an existing business, you can at least evaluate that. You could screw it up. That's real.
Right.
But you can often get financing. You can bring investors in. And if you have people who you've done work with, who believe in you, or friends and family who believe in you, you can often get a loan because you have that experience in that business to buy that business.
Sure.
And you can do that with no money down of your own. Sometimes your investors will want you to have some commitment and have some of your own money in there.
Right.
But often if they know you, they're open to that.
So you talked a little bit about money. I think that's one of the things that scares people away from buying an existing business. They think that I will start from scratch on a low budget, and they don't take into consideration how long a runway they have for their cash. What are some ways that people can finance a business when they're getting started?
So one of the ways, of course, is the SBA, Small Business Administration, has loan rules and guidelines that banks can tap into and do a loan for a party. So
okay.
The bank will say, they want you to have 20% down. However, you can often do that deal with 10% down.
Okay.
And sometimes the seller holds a note for 10%. Sometimes there's investors that come in. There's all different ways. Now, let's say you have a $4 million company. That 10%, 400,000 is a big number.
Right.
Maybe you have 50 grand. And you don't want that to be your only 50 grand.
Sure.
That's when you really need to raise capital.
Okay.
So let's say you have a masonry company and you've been a mason for a long time. So you have contractors who know you. You might have large companies who know you. You might have private equity companies who own other contracting companies who know you. That's where your financial resources would need to go. That being said, you'd have to understand how to pay them back. You might need to get a great attorney.
Sure.
You need a great accountant who can really help you with this. That's where people get tripped up. And that's why sometimes starting small and just maybe you're now your own masonry company and you have your own people and you start little by little, there's nothing wrong with it.
Sure.
It's just another avenue.
What are some of the common mistakes that people make when they're looking to acquire a business, whether it be financing or other areas?
I think first people have to set their goals, and they also have to understand what their talents are. What are they good at? I'm great at sales and marketing. I know that for myself. I'm
Sure.
great at selling a company, and I understand what needs to be done. I am not great at managing people. I know that about myself.
All right.
And I think sometimes people aren't self-aware. They don't know what they're good at.
Right.
I think that that's one start. I think the second item is they don't believe in themselves.
Okay.
You really have to have a strong belief. It's a huge risk. And it's what most people aren't able to do. You're doing something that most people can't do. You're embarking on a journey that most people don't have the confidence to go on.
Interesting.
And you might fail.
Right.
And that's a reality. So you have to know that. And that's a tough pill to swallow. It's not for everybody. Not everybody should have their own company.
Sure.
But I believe everybody can. I don't think you have to be the smartest person. I don't think you have to be the most educated person. There's education that's like just-in-time education, right?
Right.
You don't have to be studying entrepreneurship your whole life to be able to start a company. You don't have to start at age 5. You need to know basic math.
Sure.
You need basic accounting skills. You need basic skills on can you work with different people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with that, you can have your own company. And you're going to make some mistakes, but it's that belief in yourself, that willingness to take that risk and march on that journey, that makes the difference.
One of the things you just mentioned was operating a business versus buying a business. Is that something that people overlook, or is that a common stumbling block for people that they don't consider when buying a business? They see the deal, it's a good deal. They don't think down the road of how is this business going to operate? How am I going to operate this business?
This is such an interesting question. This goes along the lines of when you sign up to do something, you aren't always sure what you're getting.
Sure.
Completely, right? You signed up to have kids, but you did not sign up for, throwing up at 2 a.m.
Right.
You don't sign up for all of these things. And so there are, this happens in business.
Yeah.
I think, there's a business that I sold recently, and the seller would go and pick up equipment in different states.
Okay.
He didn't trust other people to do it. Now, I fully think that you could go and have somebody do that, but he had never wanted to let that piece go.
Sure.
He felt that that was something he was good at. He would also have to pay that person for that piece of equipment right there.
Okay.
So there was that element.
Sure.
He would usually pay cash. It was all on the books, but he just felt he would always get a better deal if he paid cash.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't know if he's right or wrong. We didn't experiment on that, but that was his thesis for how he ran that business. The new owner does not want to always be on the road. He wants to sometimes be on the road. So he's open to it.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't want to drive to Louisiana to go pick up a piece of equipment
Sure.
and drive all the way back.
Right.
So that's a real thing. And it can be done differently than how it was being done.
So you can find ways around those operational impediments that may be there.
Like, how about you fly into Louisiana, right? You then take an Uber. You agree on the piece of equipment. You arrange for a hauler to pick up that piece of equipment and then bring it to you.
Sure.
And then you fly back that day. You're only out one day. You're not out 6 days or 4 days or 2 days. Or sometimes the seller was like, yeah, I'll sleep in the car. He was making $1.5 million a year.
All right.
The buyer didn't want to sleep in the car.
Right.
So there are different ways of doing tasks, and everybody has their own comfort level. And that's the thing. Sometimes when sellers start something from nothing, with nothing, They never had anything. So why would they stay in a fancy place, right? They remember what it was like to have nothing.
Sure.
Versus this very well educated buyer who's now going to take it to the next level. He knows you don't have to sleep in the car.
Right.
He doesn't mind spending $150.
So it's be flexible and learn along the way.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I think that a lot of people think that buying a business is very complex. Can you kind of take us back and break down a few simple steps to say, here's where you start, here's where you go, just so people can kind of get a lay of the land of what buying a business looks like?
Buying a business is complex.
Okay.
And people are complex. Anyone who's ever told me, oh, people are the same everywhere you go, I'm like, have you been here? Because that's not true.
Right.
Right. And you mentioned that you were from Wisconsin originally. They are not the same as the people in Apopka.
Sure.
And they are not the same as the people in South Florida. People are complex and businesses are complex. And there's a multi-layer of systems you have to look at. The company has a culture. The company has a feel.
Mm-hmm.
The company has a way of doing things. It does not mean it's the only way of doing things, but it is a system in place and you're going to have to interface with that system. It's not something you'll see on the tax return. It's not something you'll see necessarily the first time you meet the owner. So when you look at all these systems and complexities, you have to evaluate each one.
Mm-hmm.
That's why sometimes, there was a company I'm selling and we just had a conversation. And I said to the seller, listen, if I bring you someone and you don't like them, we're done with that guy.
Sure.
Come on. We can't spend time with somebody that you're not going to enjoy working with when you transition the business from 6 months to a year. It's not going to go well.
Right.
And you say you can do anything for 6 months. I mean, why do that?
Right.
So I think that the complexities are just something you have to factor in. You have to factor in how they do their books. You have to factor in what the seller's daily tasks are. Is there a bottleneck where all of the decisions are ultimately made with the seller?
Sure.
And that's something that sometimes they don't even realize. There was an HVAC company I sold a couple years ago. And the only reason I was able to sell that company, I originally had valued it many years prior, but the child of the owner passed away.
Okay.
And I wouldn't have been able to sell that company otherwise. So there was a lot of emotion that went with the sale. Like, it was never intended to be sold.
Sure.
The seller got very ill and then had to step away from the business and realized the business made more money without him there.
Sure.
That people weren't really purposed for their best use. Because when you delegate properly and you allow your team to do what they do best, business runs really well. And so his team was finally able to kind of be set free a little bit, operate like Hong Kong,
Right.
and really get to the next level. And he was making like 30%.
Interesting. So, Jackie, looking at the business climate that we're in right now, just off the top of your head, if you had to pick 3 businesses that you would be interested in buying, what would you pick right now?
I would say one of my top 3 home services and services, plumbing, HVAC, roofing, remodeling, any sort of niche that you can do, windows and doors.
Sure.
I love those types of businesses. I think service businesses, landscaping, engineering, all of those different things are really something that I would like. And third, I love manufacturing.
Okay.
Manufacturing products, whether it's construction or for something unique. I've always been excited about manufacturing, anything from food to, building materials, but manufacturing is always a little bit interesting.
Interesting.
But I think that there's all sorts of service businesses that people can do. There's a company that does high-end cleaning. There's all sorts of cleaning that can be done. Anything that people don't want to do, there's an opportunity.
Sure.
Or people can't do. I don't mind mowing my lawn. I just can't always do it.
Sure.
So I don't do it. I have somebody else do it, and if I want to plant something edible, I do that part.
Right.
In my yard.
So conversely, is there one business that you would say, don't buy it in this economy right now?
There's a lot of those.
All right.
I just don't like.
Okay.
I don't like any business where your physical safety is at risk.
Okay.
And I don't mean by the job. I mean by maybe it's dangerous to do that job.
Sure.
Maybe it's something open at night or something where there could be high theft possibility. So anything that you wouldn't want your family to be at after dark,
Sure.
I would not own.
Okay.
So that's my personal thing. I'm big on personal safety, and at the end of the day, you want to return home to your family.
Right. No amount of money is worth sacrificing your safety.
Worth it. Not worth it. And I guess for a job, if physical safety is an issue, I would really question that.
Sure.
I would not use a tree service that does not have proper crane equipment.
Sure.
Really heavy duty, top notch. I will pay more for that. They have better insurances. Their people are better trained than the guy that climbs the tree and does it. He can do an amazing job, but I don't want somebody at risk.
Sure.
And I think that there's ways to do jobs in modern times where the person doesn't have to be at risk.
So you mentioned that, if you do the work in the trades, people will come to you. I think that there's a diverging of opinion on whether you need college to be successful in life or not. And I think a lot of the tradespeople, a lot of the entrepreneurs, a lot of the construction people that are watching our channel have not gone to college. Can they buy business? Can they be successful without that base, college learning?
I love this question. So my dad was a rocket scientist.
So, okay.
Master's from Berkeley. My mom had 2 masters. I'm the least educated person in my family. I went to college, I had a full ride, and I remember my high school was kind of an experimental high school. They had all these different vocational programs.
Okay.
Which was unusual. My favorite was I'd see the masonry kids. They were kids, and they would get a masonry apprenticeship, and they'd be outside building walls in the sunshine. It was beautiful, and I was in a moldy classroom.
Right.
Classroom studying stuff that I don't want to be studying. And I would say, why am I here? I know I'm going to do business. I know I'm not going to be here. And I wasn't learning anything I wanted to learn.
Sure.
So I'm really mixed about this because now I have a child who says things that I know I thought when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, I know she's thinking.
Right.
So I've seen many owners. There was this one construction company owner. He went to my high school. He dropped out when he was 15 and he wanted to work. He worked construction and he made a ton of money at his own house by the time he was 18. But when I met him, again, he was 25 with a Lamborghini in the garage, paid for it, doing $15 million a year.
Wow.
Yeah, no joke. And no investors, started with nothing. Or there's another company in town that has, a dumpster business, and he started with 1 dumpster and is doing, 15 million in dumpster business.
Wow.
Didn't go to college. He was at a college and realized this is garbage. I'm not learning anything.
Sure.
I'm not saying that all colleges are garbage. That is not the point.
Right.
There are some exceptional higher institutions of learning out there. And when you have a focus, maybe like engineering or accounting, or you have a certain thing, I think the Rinker School of Construction at the University of Florida is spectacular, and they don't take everybody. Though there are higher levels of institutional learning out there.
Sure.
However, I think that there's a lot of people being sold a bill of goods, and then they put you in this system where you're now paying back this loan and you're an indentured servant. It's just modern day indentured servitude. That's my opinion of what it is, and it's not getting people where they want to go.
Sure.
I graduated when I was 21, so I was like, I gotta get out of here. I graduated as fast as I could so that I could start working, because that's all I ever really wanted to do. Even as a kid, whenever I was in class and they would say, Jackie, can you do this and, go take this front office? I'm like, absolutely. As fast as I could get out of there and do some sort of job. I'm not sure what that says about me, but I know there's a lot of people like that.
Sure.
That have this desire to work and be doing something and creating and building. And that's what I always wanted to be doing.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a place for it, but I also think that these apprenticeship programs are incredible. And I think those are the people making the money.
Sure.
We have a law firm for sale, and those guys are broke often. They look at these law firms, they don't have 2 pennies to rub together.
Interesting.
They're in their fancy, and they're driving their fancy, got to live in a fancy house. Kids have to go to the fancy school, and they don't have 2 cents. They're in debt up to their eyeballs from student loans.
Right.
And then I have these guys that roll up in jeans and a pickup truck and a t-shirt with a hole in it and armpit stains, and like these guys are making millions.
Right.
And sending their kids to the fancy schools.
Right.
So it's a really unique time, but I think people with skills are rare these days. It used to be passed down from families.
Sure.
And now you don't do what your dad did. There's a dad shortage.
Mm-hmm.
The real thing in society, there's a dad shortage, and there's separation of families. And so the units used to do certain tasks. They used to do certain trades. And you need that apprenticeship time.
Sure.
For business brokerage, I really didn't get much of that time because the person who hired me then sold a company where I was just kind of left to kind of figure it out for myself.
Right.
But it sure is a lot nicer when somebody's there to show you. You have that mentorship. Mentorship is meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Mentorship is really useful. And I think companies are seeing that. But if you have the desire to be self-driven and to teach yourself and to go out there and to create and make mistakes, or go forward with a trade, you see what you like, I think that you can really build something great over time.
Definitely.
In the legal field, they say that where you really make your money is by year 20. And that's in a lot of fields. Like, year 20. Think about it. If you start something when you're 20, by the time you're in your 40s, you're really raking it in.
Mm-hmm.
And you're still young enough, you still know a lot, and you can take something to the next level. During that time, you could still have a family and have a life and build roots. All of those different things that people really want when they're leading a noble life. But I believe that when you have a trade, when you have a skill, you are leading a noble life. My skill, my trade is selling companies.
Mm-hmm.
That is my craft. I advise people very deeply, and a lot of times on an emotional level, how they're going to handle this transition. One of my sellers last year grew up in a trailer. Then I give them a check for $5 million. Those two people coexist in the same body.
Right.
You have to have some discussions.
Right.
Because it's hard for them to process.
Yeah.
That they're wealthy. It's very hard.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, you mentioned that there's a kind of a difference between good debt and bad debt.
Yes.
And when someone is evaluating a business deal, how do they know that the deal is a good deal for them?
This is really subjective.
Okay.
So that's one of the first things. It's subjective. What are they willing to pay for it? But when you run the numbers after debt service, does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So let's break down kind of a deal just in the air.
Sure.
Let's say you have a company that has a net earnings to a seller. So seller's discretionary cash flow
Mm-hmm.
is what they call it. CF or SDE, seller's discretionary earnings.
Okay.
Let's say it's $500,000. Okay. And let's say the deal is for $1.5 million. So it's 3 times earnings is the price of the business.
Okay.
Let's say you're making $100,000 a year. Okay, that's your salary.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't have to invest anything to get that $100,000. But for this deal, you could buy it with $150,000 down. Let's say you have 50, you have 2 investors, right? And that we can set aside.
Sure.
After paying them back, and after paying back the debt service, which would be over a 10-year term, and let's say it's 0 interest, so I can just do the math in my head, $150,000 a year
Sure.
of, debt service.
Right.
Something roughly like that. Well, if it's netting $500,000, then after debt service, that's $350,000. Let's say you owe your investors another $50,000. You're making $300,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's 3 times what you were making.
First your 100,000, then you were making, right?
You get your investment back and your investor's investment back in the first year, and you can grow. You have money. You've been living on the $100,000, so I'm assuming you can stay in that part.
Sure.
Up until 125. Go daring.
Right.
And so that's one way to evaluate. Does this improve my life? Does it make it better?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good way to look at it. How can you get to the next level? If you're evaluating a deal and the net is $100,000 after debt service, that probably isn't the right deal.
Sure.
It's got to get you to the next level. And that's good debt because it's cash flow. And there's assets, or there's maybe there's non-party assets. Maybe it's just these contracts. Maybe it's the contacts. Maybe it's the payment in place. All of these different scenarios, tangible and intangible assets that take it to the next level, that get you to the next place.
Sure.
That's where you evaluate it. Does it make sense for me?
Interesting.
If you have to uproot your family, is that worth it?
Right.
Your wife's going to be like, oh yeah, I've been dying to live in Levi County. Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
It used to not be popular, but now when we have deals in kind of more remote parts of Florida, people are very into it.
Mm-hmm.
They want to leave where they were at.
Sure.
After COVID and things went a certain way, we have people that don't want to be told what to do and where they can go.
Right.
And they need more freedom.
Sure.
So we see in certain states like Florida, where it's an open for business state, is what I call it, that they're open to all parts of Florida.
You mentioned some red flags financially, we were talking, about does this make sense for me? Are there like intangible red flags that you've seen over time where you look at a deal and you're like, this isn't financial related, but this is not a good deal because of this reason?
There was a deal recently. There was a buyer who really wanted this deal, loved this deal, loved what they built. They built, I don't want to say what they built, but they built something that was window and doors related.
Okay.
And the buyer just loved it, but the partners were having problems.
Okay.
And they could not get along. And it had been like this for a while. It had been like a really unpleasant marriage for 30 years.
Wow.
And I had just told the buyer, I said, listen, I know you love this deal, but you need to walk away from this. This is not for you.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers were good. The business was good. They had some older systems because 30-year-old business, so they still did some big things on an Excel spreadsheet that they shouldn't have.
All right.
But, you got to walk away.
Sure.
Or sometimes, there was another deal I had somebody walk away from. Actually, I called him. I'm like, I was really thinking about this. I know you want to put an offer, but I think you should run.
Right.
He's like, oh, interesting. I called him at 7 a.m. the next day. I was like, I could not stop thinking about this. I do not want you to put an offer on this. I know you like this business, but here's why.
Mm-hmm.
And he thanked me. And we didn't put an offer in on that business. And I think that was the right thing. It's still not pending. There was something wrong with the business.
Sure.
The seller had a bunch of receivables, but it all closed the business, but said he could just open it right back up.
Okay.
So I don't know if there was a lawsuit that he thought was coming, but there was like a couple million receivables that would transfer with this business for $3 million.
Interesting. Yeah.
Unusual. That would not usually happen, right? But he hadn't been doing any work for 3 months. So when something just doesn't smell right, like you don't go for it.
Sure.
Something's not right.
Is that intuition, or do you find that from spending time with a business owner, or if a business owner, a tradesman is looking to buy, a gutter business, do you recommend they spend time, at the business that they're trying to evaluate? How do you find out, those things?
Spending time at the business to evaluate is tricky. A lot of sellers won't let you, see the business in operation.
Sure.
Ride along. Sometimes there's something you can do. Maybe you could go with a seller and do a delivery somehow. Maybe he would allow you to drive past some jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That can be really tricky and sensitive. Nobody wants their employees to know that they're for sale.
Sure.
For many reasons. One, you don't want the employee to worry about if somebody would fire all the employees. You don't even want that in their head.
Sure.
And now with tradespeople, it's so hard to find great people. They don't want to lose them.
Mm-hmm.
I think you really have to have some deep conversations and really have the seller map out what they're doing every day. I think you should meet the seller a few times at the business on the weekends or after hours, a couple different times. And then you'll see the workflow. They have a whiteboard, or they have systems, or they have their CRM that shows what's going on, and you see an update of that.
Sure.
That's realistic, and you start to get a feel. You'll never fully understand what they do or problems that they have. Fully understand it, but you can get close. But yeah, if there's something that does not smell right, you will know, and it will speak to you in a big way. There will be some sort of uncomfortableness because something's not right.
Sure.
Or something's glitching with the seller, or that they're not telling you something. I think a lot of times it's obvious. And then when you really do full due diligence and you have a good accountant that matches the bank statements, the credit card statements, with the QuickBooks, with payroll, right? It's all got to make sense.
Sure.
Then you look at what the cash flow is on a monthly basis. So a lot of people aren't doing their due diligence, or they don't hire an accountant that really knows how to do that.
Yeah.
I think that you'll see problems as well. People don't understand seasonality, or sometimes intricacies with suppliers, or if there's a family relationship, you have to know if family work there.
Sure.
That's a huge thing also. Sometimes people are like, oh yeah, my wife does a couple things. And like, she's running the show.
Right.
You're like, oh yeah, she's home with the kids. And this lady's like amazing and completely running the back end of the business.
Sure.
And yeah, she can do it in 2 hours a day because she knows it cold.
Mm-hmm.
But really, a new person, you might need 2 separate people. Or maybe she's a fixer, and she fixes problems that you don't even know that they have.
Is that an advantage of using a business broker, though? Using someone where you get involved with your intuition, where you can help sniff out those red flags for people?
I think so. I think I have some sort of glitchy problem when somebody's like, Jackie, I'd like your opinion. I'm like, well, okay. And then I share exactly my opinion.
Right.
So there's some upsides and downsides to that quality. But yeah, I'll tell people, this is why I like the business.
Sure.
This is the hair on the deal. There's always hair on the deal. There's never a business that's perfect, just like there's never a perfect person.
Sure.
Business profile, initial profile is like an initial dating profile. It doesn't say an initial dating profile, this person must get sleep. Otherwise, they are super cranky and unpleasant, right? Or you must feed this person. It doesn't say that in the dating profile, but it's there.
Right.
And that's real.
Yeah.
So in the business profile, it doesn't say, the seller really has not managed vacation time well, or lets the team accrue too much vacation. But that's something you have to figure out.
Sure.
And there's just questions you have to ask. I'm doing a deal right now, and culture is huge when we do deals. And I finally had to say to the sellers, I said, listen, I need to make a comment. And they said, okay. I said, listen, you're from West Virginia, right? And I'm from Florida. You and I actually do business the same. But the buyer's from Maine. He does not do business the way we do. There is nothing warm and fuzzy.
Interesting.
This guy has integrity. He'll take care of your people. He's going to be good to your customers. But he does not have that Southern charm, that welcome, you can come over anytime and call me anytime. He's just not that guy.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still do that. He won't share it that way.
Sure.
And when I said that, it was like every problem we had with the deal so far all made sense. Just kind of putting that out there.
Yeah.
This is your guy. He's still going to take care of your people and they'll be happy.
Sure.
But it's not going to be exactly how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And culture is huge. There was this one deal we did, and it was a solar company. They set up solar panels, and the buyer came in. He was British. He showed up. We still talk about this. He showed up wearing the exact same outfit as the seller.
All right.
Only different places.
Right.
They had the same beard. They're wearing the same outfit. Then in the middle of the discussion, the seller's like, listen, man, I've been trying to cut down on smoking, but I really need to take a cigarette. And the buyer's like, I'll join you. And we're like, these guys were the same.
Yeah.
2 totally different countries.
Sure.
Different countries. And they were so similar.
Right.
And I think that that's what a lot of times really makes sense. When you do a deal, it's about, a similar culture, but that doesn't always mean you can have 2 people from Orlando, Florida. It is not the same culture.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not the same background. But sometimes there's things that people really have in common.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the deal work.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a deal now. Man, these partners couldn't be more different. You would meet them and that these 2 guys are not friends.
Okay.
But they can trust each other. They have different opinions, but they respect that they have different opinions. They don't always agree. It's not caused problems in the business, but it's definitely some friction.
Sure.
But they trust each other. And so I made that point to them, and nobody had ever said that. Everyone's like, oh, I would never put you guys together as partners. But they can trust each other. They have totally different ways of operating. And when you see that, you realize that is a successful match.
Sure.
It's not perfect, but that's something you can work. So you have to meet people where they're at, and you have to look at yourself and look at others and figure out what's important to you.
Sure. Well, we've talked about so many aspects of buying a business or selling a business. For all of our viewers, is there any other tips or advice you want to leave them with when your encouragement for them looking to buy a business for themselves?
I think the most important thing is to believe in yourself. I think believing in yourself goes a long way. I still think you need support and data and help.
Sure.
But if you have that self-doubt, I can't do this, well, you're not going to be able to do it. But I believe really everybody does have the capability. I
Sure.
think it's unique to smart people, or unique to educated people, or unique to wealthy people. I started with nothing, and I've seen many other people start with nothing and grow big things. And yes, it does help if you have some family money. I mean, that's real, but not always.
Sure.
Sometimes it's just that belief that you can go to the next level. You have to look inside your soul and see that golden flower that exists, and that's out there for you. I know it sounds simple, but it's out there. And then if you have a skill, you can always be a solopreneur, and there's nothing wrong with that. You name your game, you name who you work with, you live by your own wits, and you make your own work, and you do it, and no one owns you.
Sure.
And that is real. That's why I work for myself. I can't work for a company, and I don't work for clients I don't want to work for.
Sure.
Sometimes I meet people, oh, it was so nice meeting you. I don't think I'm the right fit for you. And nothing against them, but that's just what I know for me.
Right.
So I think if people just take that step, have a skill, and they do that skill, they can go really far. But if nothing else, you work for yourself. And I'd rather make 50 grand a year and work for myself than make 500,000 a year and work for somebody else. Final thought.
I love that. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you sitting down with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's just been an honor to be here.